The neighbors all smiled the same way, but behind those cheerful eyes, there was something terrifying. I still remember the day Jenna and I first pulled into Willow Heights. We'd been married 6 years, and for at least half of that time, we'd dreamed of leaving the noisy city behind. Willow Heights boasted white picket fences, immaculate lawns, a robust neighborhood watch, and a quaint sign that proclaimed, "Welcome to the perfect neighborhood." We both let out a sigh of relief. It felt like we'd finally made it. The very first thing I noticed was how everyone seemed to smile in exactly the same way. It wasn't just friendly, it was identical. My new next-door neighbor, Mrs. Larson, came out to greet us with a plate of freshly baked brownies. She was a petite woman in her 50s, her cropped silver hair brushed perfectly into place. She handed me the brownies and said, "We've been expecting you. So lovely to finally meet." Her voice had that same melodic timbre as half the people we'd seen milling about outside. At first, I chalked it up to small-town politeness. People in the suburbs, I told myself, are just a different breed. They bake welcome treats, wave from their porches, and genuinely want to be part of each other's lives. After years of living in the city, where no one made eye contact on the subway, this was a refreshing change, until I started noticing how eerily in sync everyone seemed. 2 days after moving in, we got an invitation slipped under our door for the neighborhood meet and greet. It was to be held in Mr. Reynolds' backyard, a few houses down. He was the self-appointed president of the Willow Heights Neighborhood Association. The invitation was beautifully printed, complete with floral borders and an RSVP request. Jenna and I decided to attend because we wanted to integrate ourselves into the community. After all, how else do you truly get to know your neighbors? When we arrived, a sumptuous barbecue was already underway. Hamburgers, hot dogs, freshly squeezed lemonade. Everyone wore bright pastel colors, polo shirts, sundresses, khaki shorts, and each introduced themselves with a handshake and an uncomfortably familiar smile. Kids played on the manicured lawn, but even they acted in an orderly, almost rehearsed way. If one child fell down, the others would stop simultaneously, tilt their heads, and then resume playing. It was subtle, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Mr. Reynolds, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a fixed grin, welcomed us personally. "We're so glad you're here," he said, pumping my hand in a firm grip. "We like to maintain a certain standard here in Willow Heights. We believe in unity. We're a family." His words felt a bit heavy-handed, but Jenna flashed me a look that said, "Don't be weird, just smile and nod." So I played along, assured myself it was just small-town quirkiness. Maybe unity was their motto or something. A few nights later, I woke up to a soft humming sound. My digital clock read 2:13 a.m. Jenna was fast asleep, so I slipped out of bed and peered out the window. In the pale glow of the streetlights, I saw a line of figures robed in white, gliding silently down the street in single file. My heart hammered. Even in the darkness, I recognized Mrs. Larson's silver hair peeking out from her hood. The entire group turned a corner and disappeared behind the community center. I desperately wanted to follow them, but I was frozen in place. A cold sweat slicked my palms. The next morning, while Jenna fixed coffee, I casually asked her if she'd heard anything at night. She shook her head, pointing out that I seemed tired, maybe stressed from the move. "We wanted a quiet life, remember? Let's not go conjuring nightmares," she said with a gentle smile. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few days later, I spotted a note slipped under our door. It read, in immaculate handwriting, "We see you watching." No signature, no return address. My stomach dropped. I showed it to Jenna, who tried to laugh it off as some bizarre welcome joke. I wasn't laughing. From then on, whenever I walked outside, I felt eyes on me. Neighbors out watering their lawns or walking their dogs would swivel their heads, giving me that unwavering grin. Once, Mr. Reynolds materialized beside me as I was pruning the rose bushes in our front yard. I nearly dropped the shears. He asked, "You settling in all right?" But his tone was loaded with subtext. I mustered a polite nod. He tapped the picket fence with a grin and said, "Willow Heights is a special place. We look after each other, you know. We make sure everyone does what's best for the community." Then he walked away, leaving me rattled. That evening, I tried to let go of my paranoia by binge-watching a show with Jenna. Around midnight, we heard a strange scratching sound at our front door. I rushed over, opening it a crack, and found a pamphlet on our welcome mat. It read, "Conformity is Unity." Inside were several bullet points about mandatory gatherings, dress codes, and shared beliefs. I confronted Mrs. Larson the next morning as she was clipping her hedges. "What's this about?" I demanded, holding up the pamphlet. She flashed that smile. "Don't make such a fuss, dear. Everyone in Willow Heights knows about our creed. We simply want to ensure harmony." My mouth went dry. "A creed? Since when does a neighborhood have a creed?" She shrugged. "We've always had it. And now that you're here, you're part of us. Attending gatherings, following our guidelines. It's all non-negotiable." It wasn't just off-putting, it was terrifying. I told Jenna everything, but she insisted we give it one more chance. "Let's just go to one of these gatherings," she reasoned. "See what it's all about before jumping to conclusions." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The so-called weekly gathering took place at the community center. We walked into a large hall lit by rows of flickering candles. The windows were blacked out with heavy curtains, making it impossible to see outside or in. At least 50 people were seated on folding chairs arranged in a circle. They were all wearing white robes, the same ones I'd seen in the street. At the center stood Mr. Reynolds, his hands clasped in front of him. Our arrival caused a small stir. No one spoke, but their heads turned in unison. Mr. Reynolds motioned for us to sit in 2 empty chairs. The tension was suffocating. We complied, feeling every gaze boring into us. He started chanting in a low voice, "In Willow Heights, we uphold the creed. Conformity is unity. Conformity is unity." The others echoed him in a dull chorus. The words became a rhythmic drone, sending shivers down my spine. Then Mr. Reynolds picked up a small wooden box from a table. He opened it, revealing a row of ominous-looking metal implements, like thin rods with sharp ends. My stomach churned. He walked around the circle, handing them out to each neighbor. When he reached us, he hesitated. "You must embrace the creed," he intoned, offering me a rod. "Willingly." Jenna's eyes met mine, and I saw raw fear, but she managed a polite, "What exactly are we supposed to do with these?" No one answered. Instead, a collective murmur swelled. "For the greater good, for the greater good." Over and over like a mantra. My heart felt like it was going to burst. This was a cult, no two ways about it. I fumbled with the rod in my hand, my mind racing for an escape plan. Suddenly, someone in the circle hissed, "Those who do not conform must be purified." The chanting escalated. I could feel adrenaline surging in my veins. When Mr. Reynolds turned his back, I jumped to my feet and grabbed Jenna's hand. We sprinted for the door. At least half the neighbors rose in unison, trying to block our escape. Chairs screeched across the floor, and the roar of chanting filled the hall. I pushed past a few robed figures, nearly tripping over candles in my haste. Jenna frantically twisted the doorknob. It was locked. "No!" she shouted, fumbling, her hands shaking. The group was closing in. I glanced around, spotted a side exit, and pulled Jenna toward it. That door opened with a creak, and a gust of cool night air slapped us in the face. We broke free into the darkness, our hearts pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. We didn't stop running until we reached our car. As I fumbled with the keys, the robed figures spilled out of the building, their white garments glowing under the streetlights. Their voices meshed into a terrifying chant. "You can't run from unity." I managed to start the car and we sped away, tires screeching. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of them standing in the middle of the street, their blank smiles lit by the flickering streetlights. The sight made my blood run cold. We never returned to that house. We paid a moving company to collect our belongings in broad daylight, with police accompaniment. As soon as we were out of Willow Heights' jurisdiction, Jenna and I crashed in a cheap motel, still trembling from the ordeal. Over the next few days, we learned from the local news that Willow Heights had a reputation for secret societies and suspicious disappearances, reports that never led anywhere because the residents closed ranks. No one would talk. Months later, even living across the country, I still have nightmares about that night. I see rows of identical smiles, white-robed neighbors chanting in a circle. Sometimes I wake up in a sweat, convinced I hear "conformity is unity" echoing in the hallway of our new apartment. Jenna tells me it's just post-traumatic stress. Maybe it is. But I still wonder if someday one of those robed figures will reappear, carrying a pamphlet with my name on it, ready to welcome me back into the fold I rejected. Perfection can hide unspeakable secrets. When everyone looks and acts the same, ask yourself what they're sacrificing, and what they expect you to sacrifice, too. The landlord said I lived alone, but the food missing from my fridge and the sounds at night told a different story. I was thrilled when I found my dream apartment, a cozy loft in a historic brownstone right in the heart of the city. The place had those exposed brick walls, tall windows, and a spiral staircase leading to a tiny second-floor nook. It felt like the perfect blend of vintage charm and modern convenience. Best of all, it was entirely mine. Or so I believed. My landlord, Mr. Abbott, was an older man with suspenders permanently attached to his shoulders, jovially proclaiming how lucky I was to get the place. The price was steep, but I figured it was worth it for the location and the space. He seemed harmless enough, if a bit eccentric. My first week was uneventful. I was busy decorating, lugging in furniture, setting up my new internet service. I worked long hours at a marketing firm, so by the time I got home, I was too tired to do much but heat up leftovers and collapse into bed. But then, oddities started piling up. I'd come home to find the bathroom light on when I was certain I'd left it off. At first I thought I was just scatterbrained. I was adjusting to living on my own, and maybe I was absent-minded in the morning rush. But it kept happening. Then a few days later, I noticed the bedroom window was open, letting in a chilly draft. I distinctly remembered closing and locking it before leaving for work. Again, I shrugged it off. Maybe I was mistaken. But the biggest clue came when I found half of my leftover pizza missing. I'd bought a large pepperoni pizza the night before and stuck the rest in the fridge. The next day, I opened the box to find a single slice. I racked my brain. Did I eat that much? I had no recollection of stuffing down 3 slices. Could I have sleepwalked? It seemed absurd, but I had no other explanation. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like footsteps coming from the kitchen area downstairs. My heart nearly pounded out of my chest. At first I told myself it was the noisy radiator or the old pipes, but the sound was distinctly human, light, almost tiptoeing steps. Summoning my courage, I crept to the edge of the spiral staircase. The kitchen was dark. I flipped on the overhead light, hoping to startle anyone lurking there, but the room was empty. Just the hum of the fridge. I checked the door. It was locked. I checked the windows, also locked. Feeling foolish, I climbed back up to bed, but I didn't sleep well. Over the next few days, the footsteps persisted at odd hours. Sometimes I heard them at midnight, sometimes in the early morning. Always faint, always just beyond my line of sight. I started feeling on edge in my own home. One evening, I set up a small camera in the living room, pointing it toward the kitchen. If someone was sneaking in, I'd have proof. Reviewing the footage the next morning, I found nothing, just static images of my empty living room. But I knew something was wrong. More food was disappearing, milk cartons were left half empty, boxes of cereal almost finished. My cat, Luna, began acting skittish, hissing at corners of the room or the closet door. Several times she'd stand in the hallway, puffed up tail, staring at the wall. I tried talking to Mr. Abbott about it. He just chuckled in that booming voice of his. Old building, old noises. Don't worry, there's no one else in your unit, and no one but me has the master key. He changed my locks to ease my mind, but I still felt that prickling unease whenever I came home. Eventually, I decided to do something drastic. Stay up all night and keep watch. I made coffee, turned off every light, and sat in the living room with a blanket. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, that gentle creak of footsteps. My heart hammered as I strained my eyes in the darkness. Then I saw it, the faint outline of my hallway closet door sliding open. My blood ran cold. Clutching my phone, I flicked on the lamp. I froze at the sight. A woman, barely more than a shadow, scurrying back into the closet, trying to close the door behind her. She was thin, with matted hair and wide, terrified eyes. Her clothes hung from her like rags, as though she'd been living rough. Instinct kicked in. "Stop!" I yelled, leaping toward the closet. She let out a panicked whimper. Inside, I discovered a hidden hatch in the back, an entrance to some kind of crawl space behind the walls. The woman tried to slip through it, but I grabbed her wrist, blocking her way. She cowered as if expecting me to hit her. "What the hell?" I gasped, my mind whirling. "You've been living here? How did you get in?" She trembled violently. "Please, don't call the cops. I didn't mean any harm. I had nowhere else to go." Her voice was shaky, desperate. I stared at her in disbelief, adrenaline surging through me. She confessed she'd found the crawl space months ago when another tenant had moved out. She claimed Mr. Abbott had told her she could stay if she did certain favors for him. I felt sick to my stomach. Before I could respond, the apartment door burst open. Mr. Abbott stormed in, mustache bristling, eyes wild. "What are you doing?" he snarled. He grabbed the woman's arm so hard she screamed. "I told you to keep hidden!" My blood turned to ice. "You knew she was here?" I demanded. "You told me I was the only tenant." He shot me a furious glance. "Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. This arrangement keeps the building safe, keeps the vagrants out. She's supposed to be my eyes and ears." I realized then that he'd leveraged her desperation. He'd kept her there to watch the tenants from behind the walls, maybe eavesdrop for blackmail. My heart hammered with a mix of fear and disgust. I tried to intervene, but Mr. Abbott shoved me into the wall. My phone clattered to the floor. He yanked the woman out of the closet, dragging her toward the door. She cried out in pain, her eyes darting pleadingly at me. Fear flared in my chest. "Let her go!" I yelled, lunging forward. For a tense moment, we struggled. Mr. Abbott was shockingly strong for his age, but adrenaline fueled me. I managed to shove him off balance. The woman scrambled behind me, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, headlights swept across the living room window. A neighbor, alerted by the commotion, must have called the police. Mr. Abbott seemed torn between fleeing and confronting me further. With sirens wailing outside, he made a split-second decision. He dashed out the door. I was left alone with the trembling woman, both of us in shock. The police arrived moments later. Initially, they were confused, especially when I told them about the hidden crawl space. But once they saw it for themselves, everything clicked. They took our statements, and it wasn't long before they found Mr. Abbott hiding in a storage room in the basement. He was arrested for multiple offenses, including illegal trespass, endangerment, and assault. The woman, whose name was Diana, was placed in a shelter. She explained that she'd become homeless after losing her job and being kicked out by her roommate. She met Mr. Abbott, who promised her a roof over her head if she'd do as he said. Keep watch on certain tenants he suspected might break rules or fail to pay rent on time. Over time, he made her spy on them, rummage through their apartments for dirt. She hadn't wanted to, but she felt she had no choice. The situation spiraled until she ended up practically living in the walls. In the weeks that followed, I moved out. I couldn't bear to stay in that apartment, not after discovering I was never really alone. Each shadow, each sound in the night, had been Diana creeping around, terrified, trying to survive. And behind her was Mr. Abbott's dark control. To this day, I'm paranoid about hidden spaces in my home. I install extra locks, check closets, tap on walls to see if they're hollow. Sometimes, I wake in the night convinced I hear footsteps again. I remind myself it's just paranoia, but I can't help imagining eyes peering from tiny cracks, ears pressed to vents, waiting, watching. In the most ordinary places, horrifying secrets can hide in the walls, both literal and metaphorical. You might think you live alone, but you never really know who or what shares your space when the lights go out. I wanted to go viral, but I never expected the challenge to follow me offline and into my nightmares. I've always loved social media. There's a rush in capturing the perfect moment, editing it just right, and watching the likes and comments pour in. It's addictive, really. I'd built a decent following on my channel, mostly doing makeup tutorials and comedic skits. But it wasn't enough. I wanted that big viral moment that would catapult me into influencer stardom. Little did I know, that desire would lead me down a terrifying path. It started with a cryptic post I saw on a friend's feed. "Anyone else seeing Hack Knock Knock?" she wrote, followed by a short clip of her standing in a dark hallway, chanting something. People in the comments joked about how Knock Knock was trending and that it was really creepy, but totally worth it if you wanted a viral hit. I was intrigued. I spent the next few hours researching the hashtag Knock Knock Challenge. Videos showed participants standing in front of a closed door, often in abandoned buildings or dark basements, whispering a rhyme that ended with a literal knock on the door. The premise was that a spirit, or something worse, would knock back. Then you posted your footage online. The scarier your reaction, the more views you got. It was a bizarre cross between a horror dare and a trending stunt. Curiosity and ambition got the better of me. I decided to do the hashtag Knock Knock Challenge in the basement of my apartment building. It wasn't exactly an abandoned location, but the flickering light bulbs and damp concrete walls were spooky enough. Armed with my phone on a tripod, I stood before the heavy metal basement door. I recited the rhyme I'd memorized from a viral video. "Knock knock, open the way. Let the watchers come out to play. If you're near, make a sound. Show yourself to those around." Then I knocked 3 times. I waited, heart pounding, secretly hoping nothing would happen because, well, I'm a bit of a chicken. But also hoping something would happen because I wanted that perfect reaction shot. Nothing. Relief washed over me, tinged with disappointment. I wrapped up the filming, planning to edit in some special effects. I posted the video that same night. My editing was minimal. I left the raw, eerie vibe. Within a day, it started to blow up. Views surged, comments streamed in. Some people claimed they heard a faint knock in the audio, which I swore wasn't there. Others said they saw a flicker of movement behind me just before the video ended. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications and my follower count soared. But then the nightmares started. The first night, I dreamed I was back in the basement facing the door. When I knocked, something on the other side pounded back so hard it dented the metal. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination. After all, I'd been focusing on spooky content all day. Yet the nightmares continued, each one more vivid. I'd see a shadowy figure in the corner of my bedroom, watch it slowly approach until I woke gasping for air. During the day, I felt on edge. I'd jump at every small noise, glance over my shoulder in crowded places. My viewers loved the content, calling it authentic and gritty. I found myself trapped between the desire for popularity and the creeping sense that something was wrong. Things escalated when I heard actual knocking on my apartment door at odd hours, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I'd approach and look through the peephole, but no one was ever there. One time, I opened the door to find a small, childlike handprint smeared on the hallway mirror across from my unit. It was too high for an actual child to reach without a stool. I started hearing faint scratching sounds in the walls. My lights flickered intermittently. My cat, Mochi, hissed at empty corners. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was following me outside of that basement video. It felt like the challenge had latched onto me, refusing to let go. Desperate, I reached out to other influencers who'd done the Hack Knock Knock Challenge. Most brushed me off, claiming it was all part of the thrill. A few admitted they'd experienced nightmares and weird knocks too, but insisted it was just self-suggestion. One friend, Raina, confided that she'd tried to delete her video after she felt a presence in her apartment, but whenever she tried to remove it, her system crashed. Raina told me about a rumored origin of the hashtag Knock Knock Challenge, an old urban legend about a door that once opened, never fully closed. The challenge was a twisted, viral iteration of a ritual used to summon something. Raina said she was going to see a paranormal specialist. I considered doing the same, but it sounded ridiculous. What would I say? "Hi, I think my trending video summoned a ghost?" In a moment of panic and maybe foolish bravery, I decided to revisit the basement and reverse the ritual. I reasoned that if a door had been opened, maybe I could shut it. Late one night, I grabbed my camera again. This time I was going to live stream. I announced to my audience that I was attempting the Hacked Knock Knock Challenge Part 2, hyping it as bigger and scarier. Deep down, I was hoping to fix whatever I'd unleashed. In the basement, I shook with nervous energy. About 2,000 people were watching my live stream. My phone's screen was flooded with chat messages, some cheering me on, others calling me insane. I stood before the same door, took a deep breath and recited, "Knock, knock, close the way, Banish Watchers. No more to stay. If you hear me, let me be. Lock the door and set me free." The moment I finished, the single light bulb overhead flickered violently, then total darkness. My phone camera's LED was the only source of light, creating a shaky beam. The chat erupted with messages. "OMG, did you see that shadow? Get out of there. This is crazy." I swallowed hard and knocked 3 times again, but softer this time, as if fearful of disturbing whatever might lurk behind the door. The echo felt ominous. I waited, breath hitched. Then, a thundering bang nearly made me drop the phone. It came from the other side of the door. My camera shook as I spun around, shining light on every corner. The door rattled on its hinges, as if something huge was slamming against it. Suddenly, a loud creak sounded behind me. I spun back to the door. Now it was ajar, even though I'd locked it before. A thick darkness loomed beyond the threshold, deeper and blacker than the unlit basement. My stomach twisted in terror. I heard an ear-splitting screech, like metal on metal, echoing from inside that pitch-black space. I screamed and bolted for the stairs. My phone's stream captured my ragged breathing, shaky footsteps. People in the chat were panicking too, saying they saw a figure in the dark, or red eyes, or some horrifying shape. I didn't dare look back. Once I reached my apartment, I ended the stream. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The video was going viral. Viewers were enthralled by the authentic terror. But I felt no relief, only dread. My door started knocking more frequently now, as if that basement presence had followed me up the stairs. My nights were a torturous cycle of terrifying dreams and real-life knocks. I tried to delete every #knock knock video from my account, but the files corrupted. My phone glitched whenever I attempted to remove them. It was as if the video, or whatever it summoned, refused to be deleted. After a week of this, I reached my breaking point. Sleep-deprived and jumpy, I called Raina's paranormal specialist. He gave me instructions for a ritual to seal a doorway. It was reminiscent of folk magic, burning sage, lighting black candles, reciting a specific chant. I didn't believe in it, but I was desperate. That night, I performed the ritual in my apartment. The lights flickered. The air turned freezing. My phone started vibrating with incoming messages. Did I start another stream by accident? And the knocking on my door became a thunderous pounding. With tears streaming, I forced out each word of the chant. A final gust of cold air swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. Then, silence. For the first time in days, the air felt still, as if something had departed. My phone had crashed and wouldn't turn on for a few minutes. When it finally did, the #knock knock videos were gone from my account, wiped clean. Every last trace was erased. Weeks have passed and the knocks have ceased. My channel took a massive hit because my viral videos vanished. Many viewers accused me of staging a hoax, then deleting content to build hype. Some felt cheated, others demanded I recreate the challenge. My subscriber count plummeted. Strangely, I didn't care. I was just grateful for peace. Late at night, though, I sometimes think I hear a faint tap-tap-tap at the walls, or see a shape flit by my peripheral vision. I remind myself the door is closed, the ritual is done. But I can't help remembering the basement door rattling and that hollow darkness beyond it. Going viral cost me more than I ever imagined, my peace of mind, my sense of safety. So if you ever feel tempted by a dangerous trend or ritual challenge, remember my story. Some doors, once opened, don't close so easily, and some knocks come from things you really don't want to let in. Chasing internet fame can lead you into dark territory. When a viral challenge claims to summon something, it might not just be a game, and you might not escape it with just a click of a button. They offered me the perfect job, but something about the interview process didn't feel right. And then I saw what was behind the office door. I'd been job hunting for months with little success. My savings were dwindling, and I was feeling desperate. That's why when I received a call from a company called Morlock Solutions, offering me an interview for a social media manager position, I couldn't believe my luck. Their online reviews were glowing. The pay listed on their website was higher than anything I'd seen before. It felt too good to be true, but I needed to try. Their office was located in a sleek downtown high-rise. The lobby alone was mesmerizing. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline, plush couches, and modern art installations. A friendly receptionist checked me in and offered me water, calling me by name the moment I stepped off the elevator. Impressive, I thought as I took a seat in the waiting area. The other candidates looked polished and confident, each wearing stylish suits. One by one, they were called into a glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. Through the glass, I could see managers in expensive clothes, sporting bright smiles and nodding enthusiastically. Yet, something about their expressions felt off. Their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes, and they rarely blinked. Eventually, the receptionist directed me to an office on the 34th floor. Instead of a conference room, she led me to a door marked with a silver plaque. Human Resources Division, Private. The corridor leading to it was oddly dim, the lights flickering as if struggling to stay on. My nerves jangled. Inside, I found a single interviewer waiting, a woman named Ms. Chen. She wore a charcoal gray suit and had the palest skin I'd ever seen. She motioned for me to sit. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. "We're very excited about your application," she said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "First, sign these non-disclosure agreements, please." I hesitated. There were at least 10 pages of fine print. She watched me intently, barely blinking. Feeling pressured, I signed them anyway. Once done, Ms. Chen asked basic questions about my background, experience, career goals, the usual, but she never made any notes. She just stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I thought that would be it, but Ms. Chen smiled. "You've made a strong impression. We'd like to move you immediately to the next stage." I was surprised. Usually you wait days or weeks before hearing back. She led me down a poorly lit corridor behind her office. The floors creaked underfoot, and the air felt stale. At the end of the hallway was a large metal door with no markings. Ms. Chen paused, turned to me and said, "You must see the core of our operations." She pushed the door open, revealing a small windowless room dominated by a large console with multiple monitors. The screens showed a live feed of what looked like the entire building: hallways, cubicles, even the break room. I swallowed, unsettled. "Is this security?" She shook her head. "We prefer to call it monitoring. We pride ourselves on a safe, controlled environment." That was the first red flag. The second came when I realized some monitors were zoomed in on employees' faces as they worked, capturing every facial twitch, every keystroke. A chill went down my spine. "This seems extensive," I said carefully. Ms. Chen didn't respond. Instead, she directed me to follow her into another room, this one behind yet another locked door. My pulse quickened at the repeated locks and private spaces. This room was larger, with stark white walls and a single table in the center. A bright fluorescent light shone overhead, casting harsh shadows. Ms. Chen gestured for me to sit in a metal chair. My mind raced. Is this normal for a job interview? Then again, maybe they were testing my adaptability under strange conditions. I reminded myself that the pay was impressive, the benefits rumored to be stellar. The door opened again, and 2 more people entered, a man and a woman, both wearing black suits. They took seats across from me, their faces devoid of emotion. Ms. Chen stood behind them, her hands clasped. The man cleared his throat. "We have a few more questions. Please answer truthfully." They proceeded to ask me invasive, personal questions, my medical history, childhood traumas, even my fears. I grew increasingly uncomfortable. Whenever I hesitated, Ms. Chen would press, "We value honesty at Morlock Solutions." Finally, the woman asked, "Do you scare easily in the dark?" I laughed nervously. I guess not." "Why?" She simply nodded. "Thank you for your time." Then all 3 stood up and walked out, leaving me alone and puzzled in the glaring light. I waited for a few minutes, unsure if I should leave. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to explore the corridor. Maybe I'd find Ms. Chen to confirm I was free to go. The hallway was eerily quiet. I passed door after door, each labeled with cryptic room numbers or code words like C2, Test Lab, Observation Unit. Then I saw a door slightly ajar, with a glowing red light inside. I couldn't help myself. I inched it open. My stomach lurched at the sight. Employees, at least a dozen, sat at desks, each wearing headphones, staring at screens. Their eyes were vacant, as if in a trance. The monitors displayed live footage from hidden cameras, city sidewalks, random apartments, a grocery store. This wasn't building security, it was surveillance on unsuspecting people. My skin prickled with horror. Suddenly, a tall figure in a white coat passed behind the employees. He wore a surgical mask and carried a clipboard. I watched him move from station to station, occasionally whispering instructions. The employees would type something, then footage on the monitors would switch to a different unsuspecting person's life. It was like a network of watchers spying on the entire city. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was beyond unethical. It was illegal. I turned to slip away, but Ms. Chen stood behind me. Her pale face looked ghostly under the red light. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said softly. I stepped back, adrenaline surging. What is this place? What are you doing?" She tilted her head. "We watch, we collect data, we ensure control. We found it reduces crime, anxiety. It's for the greater good." She paused, her eyes flicking to the door behind me. "Now that you know, you can't just leave." My hands shook. "I didn't sign up for this. I was just here for a job interview." She sighed. "Yes, the position is real. Social media manager, among other responsibilities. You'd help shape public perception of our organization. Make sure nobody suspects anything. That's why we test candidates thoroughly. We need people loyal to the cause." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I bolted past Ms. Chen, racing down the hallway. Doors blurred by. Alarms suddenly blared, red lights flashing overhead. Someone must have triggered a security lockdown. My only thought was, get out, get out, get out. I found an exit door at the end of the corridor, but it was locked. Panicking, I ducked into a stairwell, only to see another locked door at the bottom. The alarm's wail intensified, echoing in the enclosed space. A voice boomed over the intercom. "Unauthorized exit attempt. Please return to the designated area." I felt trapped. Then, from a side door in the stairwell, one of the black-suited employees who'd interviewed me earlier emerged. He put a finger to his lips, motioning for me to follow him. I hesitated. Could this be a trick? But I had no other choice. He led me through a dimly lit corridor to a small elevator. We slipped inside, and he pressed a button for the lobby. He whispered, "I'll deny this if you mention it, but I was once like you." Curiosity got me deeper than I should have gone. I'm not proud of what I do here. Leave. Never come back. When the doors opened at the lobby, he gave me a grim look. "Forget you ever heard of Morlock Solutions." I stumbled out, the alarms still screaming overhead. The receptionist was gone, the polished floors reflecting the red emergency lights. I sprinted out the front entrance, gulping fresh air, my heart in my throat. Outside, the city bustled as if nothing was amiss in that towering building behind me. I never heard from Morlock Solutions again. I tried Googling them, but their website disappeared. The online reviews I'd seen were gone, as if wiped from the internet. Even the phone number was disconnected. It was as if the entire company had vanished overnight. Part of me wondered if I'd hallucinated the whole ordeal, until I recalled the locked doors, the invasive questions, the surveillance room. That night, I slept fitfully. I dreamed of Ms. Chen's pale face, of employees in trances, of hidden cameras capturing every private moment. I woke up in a cold sweat, half expecting to find someone watching me from a dark corner. Over time, I moved on, found a job at a small marketing agency. But the memory of Morlock Solutions lingered. Sometimes, walking down a busy street, I get the prickling sensation of being watched. I catch a glimpse of a face in the crowd. Was that Ms. Chen or the man in the black suit? My rational mind says it's just paranoia, But then I recall the endless feeds on those monitors. If their operation truly was for the greater good, what else might they be spying on? A perfect job offer can hide the darkest secrets. When your instincts tell you something's off, trust them. There might be far more at stake than your career. I thought I was alone in the store until I saw the other shoppers and the way their heads turned in unison. I hate grocery shopping during the day. The crowds, the lines, the crying kids. It's sensory overload. So one night around 2 a.m., I decided to hit the 24-hour supermarket down the road. I expected a near-empty store, just me and a couple of exhausted employees. Instead, I found something I'll never forget. When I pulled into the parking lot, only a few cars were scattered around. It was unusually foggy, the streetlights casting hazy orbs of light across the asphalt. Inside, the store was silent save for the gentle hum of fluorescent lights. I grabbed a cart, noticing that the overhead music was turned off, just the soft buzz of electricity. I made my way through produce, picking up a couple of bananas and apples. The automatic misting system hissed, sprinkling water on the vegetables. A single cashier stood at the far end of the store, flipping through a magazine, barely acknowledging me. Everything seemed ordinary, at first. As I turned down the cereal aisle, I spotted someone standing at the far end, tall, motionless, their back to me. They wore a long coat and a baseball cap pulled low. I didn't think much of it until I realized they hadn't moved a muscle in the few seconds I'd been watching. They just stood there, rigid, facing the shelves. I decided to skip that aisle for the moment, figuring I'd loop back later. Pushing my cart toward the dairy section, I nearly collided with another shopper coming around the corner. We both paused, apologizing quietly. But then the person just stared at me, their eyes vacant. After a moment, they smiled, too widely, and moved on without a word. A prickling sensation ran up my arms. Something about that smile was unnerving. I tried to shake off the weird vibe. Maybe they were just tired or lost in their own world. But as I continued shopping, I noticed more people in the aisles than I'd expected at this hour. And they all seemed off. Their movements were slow, almost robotic. Whenever they picked up an item, they'd examine it for a few seconds, then place it in their cart with an exaggerated precision. Then came the moment that made my blood run cold. As I approached the frozen food section, I spotted 3 shoppers huddled near the ice cream cooler. They stood so still that I thought they might be mannequins. Suddenly, in unison, they turned their heads toward me. No words, just a synchronized movement. Their eyes fixed on me like I was a curiosity. My heart lurched into my throat, and I backed away, trying not to look spooked. Feeling rattled, I headed to the front of the store. My cart was only half full, but I figured I'd seen enough. The cashier was still there, leaning on the counter. As I approached, I noticed she was wearing a name tag that said Darla. She had short, curly hair and a tired expression. I forced a casual tone. "Hey, kinda busy for this time of night, huh?" Darla blinked slowly. "Is it?" I glanced over my shoulder, seeing multiple figures drifting up and down the aisles. "Yeah, quite a few night owls in here." She nodded, but her eyes didn't follow my gaze. "That's nice." I waited for more, but she said nothing. It was like trying to chat with a half-asleep robot. Finally, I just mumbled, "Right," and rolled my cart toward the self-checkout. But a flickering overhead light made me stop. The self-checkout lane was roped off, apparently out of order. I sighed, returning to Darla's counter. Just as I started unloading my items, I heard the squeak of carts behind me. I turned to see 5 or 6 of those strange shoppers lining up in perfect formation, their carts empty or nearly empty. They stared at me, unblinking. My pulse pounded in my ears. Something was very, very wrong. I tried to ignore them, focusing on Darla scanning my bananas and milk. But she was scanning painfully slowly, almost in slow motion. The beep of each item felt like a hammer strike in the oppressive silence. The hair on my neck stood on end. I could sense all those eyes on me. At one point, I glanced behind me again. Each shopper was smiling the same eerie smile, lips stretched wide, teeth clenched. One of them, a middle-aged woman in a floral dress, raised her hand in a stilted wave. It was so unnatural that I nearly dropped my wallet. Suddenly, I remembered I still needed eggs. Against my better judgment, I left my cart and dashed to the back of the store, hoping to grab a carton quickly. The moment I turned down the refrigerated aisle, I saw something that made my heart freeze. A short man with a baseball cap was crouched on top of one of the freezers, perched like a gargoyle. His head slowly swiveled to face me. I stood paralyzed as he hopped down with an audible thud, landing just a few feet away. He then walked past me, not saying a word, not making eye contact, but exuding an air of menace. I forced myself to grab a carton of eggs and hurry back to the front. Darla was still scanning my items even though I'd been gone for at least a minute. The other shoppers were now in a half circle around the checkout counter, carts facing inward like a corral. My heart hammered. I placed the eggs on the conveyor and Darla, without any sign of urgency, scanned them. I swiped my card and waited. The terminal beeped and I snatched my receipt, stuffing it in my pocket. As I pushed my cart toward the exit, the cluster of shoppers parted like a curtain, maintaining those eerily plastered smiles. I tried not to look at them, but my peripheral vision caught each set of eyes tracking my every move. My cart bumped over the threshold of the automatic doors, and I nearly sobbed with relief as the cool night air hit me. The fog was even thicker now, swirling in ghostly tendrils around the parking lot. I fumbled with my keys, popped the trunk, and started loading bags. Then I noticed one figure, a tall woman with long black hair, standing in the store doorway. She was watching me, motionless, her face partially obscured by shadow. I slammed the trunk shut, hopped in my car, and locked the doors. The engine roared to life, and I tore out of the lot, tires squealing. For days after, I felt unsettled. I tried telling friends about the midnight supermarket, but they laughed it off. "Man, that's why I don't shop so late," they joked, or chalked it up to the employees pranking me. But I knew what I saw. Those people weren't normal. Their synchronized movements, the unnatural smiles, something was deeply wrong. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me, and I drove by the supermarket during the day. It looked normal enough, families going in, a few employees outside collecting carts. But when night fell, I couldn't bring myself to step inside again. I kept picturing those shoppers turning their heads in perfect unison. I've since moved to the other side of the city, where there's no 24-hour grocery store. Good riddance, I say. Yet sometimes, when I'm up late, I recall that cold, silent store. I imagine rows of blank-faced shoppers stalking the aisles in the dead of night. It's more than enough motivation to do my errands at a reasonable hour, where normalcy and crowds of real people might keep the horrors at bay. But there's one last detail that still haunts me. When I reviewed my bank statement, I saw my grocery store charge, time-stamped at 2:37 a.m. Right under the store name was a note, "Transaction location not found," as if the place didn't exist on any official record. I can't explain it. All I know is I'll never wander into a midnight supermarket again. Some bargains just aren't worth the price. Some places aren't meant for human company after dark. When everyone moves in sync and smiles just a little too wide, you might be in a place where reality frays and the locals aren't quite human. At first, I thought they were just friendly, but when they started finishing my sentences, I knew something was wrong. I work at a medium-sized tech startup. We specialize in app development, so the work environment is usually laid back. Beanbag chairs, free coffee, flexible hours. We're a tight-knit group sharing jokes, going for happy hours. That's why it was a big deal when the boss announced a new hire, a software engineer named Sam. We were excited to welcome someone fresh to the team, but Sam was different. Sam arrived on a Monday morning, sporting a crisp button-down and a polite smile. During the introductory meeting, they seemed confident but not overbearing, just the right amount of friendly. We all took turns shaking hands, offering to show them around. They immediately remembered everyone's name, which was impressive. I chalked it up to a great memory. That day, Sam sat with me at lunch. They asked me about my hobbies, my hometown, even my favorite movies. It was flattering that they were so interested. But as we chatted, I felt a flicker of unease, like Sam was analyzing my every word, storing the information somewhere. Still, I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to first-day jitters. Over the next few weeks, Sam excelled at their job, almost too well. They solved complex coding challenges in half the time it took others. They quickly befriended the entire team, always knowing exactly what to say to make someone laugh or feel at ease. At first, we adored them, but little by little, Sam's knowledge of personal details started creeping people out. I'd casually mention I was craving pizza for lunch, and Sam would pop up behind me saying, "You like pepperoni, right? It's your favorite." I'd never told them that. Or a coworker, Priya, would mention she was worried about her dog, and Sam would say, "Oh, Buster? He's going to be fine after his vet visit." Priya had never mentioned her dog's name to Sam. We tried to brush it off as Sam being observant or overhearing stuff, but it felt deeper than that, like Sam could read minds or was always one step ahead in conversations. It reached a breaking point one evening when I stayed late to finish a project. Sam was also there, quietly typing in a corner of the open office. The overhead lights were dim, casting long shadows. At around 8 p.m., I stretched in my chair and thought to myself I could really use a coffee. As if on cue, Sam stood up, walked over to the coffee machine, and returned with a steaming cup, handing it to me without a word. I stared at them, unnerved. "How did you know I wanted coffee?" I asked. They shrugged, giving me a small smile. "Just a hunch." A week later, the entire dev team was brainstorming. I started to say, "What if we integrated?" And Sam cut in. "A real-time analytics feature." Exactly, that's what I was thinking too. It didn't just happen once, it happened repeatedly. Sam finishing my thoughts, my sentences, as if they'd already run through every possibility in my head. Everyone in the room fell silent, exchanging uneasy glances. Our HR manager, Carlos, decided to do a more thorough background check on Sam, just to put our minds at ease. Oddly enough, Sam's references were impeccable. Glowing recommendations from companies that sounded vaguely familiar but no one could quite place. Their LinkedIn was sparse, listing previous roles at businesses we couldn't verify. One night, Carlos confided in me that some of the contact numbers for Sam's references were disconnected. The companies listed didn't have websites. It was as if Sam had emerged from a well-crafted backstory, but no one could confirm it was real. Things escalated when Priya stumbled upon a hidden folder in the company's shared drive named Profiles. Inside were subfolders labeled with each team member's name. Each folder contained detailed notes about our personalities, preferences, families, and even potential weaknesses, like a psychological profile. The metadata showed that Sam was the one who created and accessed these files. Priya showed me my file, and I felt my blood run cold. It had details about my relationship with my father, which I'd only mentioned in passing to a close friend outside of work. How could Sam know this? The more I scrolled, the more intimate the details became. My childhood fears, my insecurities about my job performance, everything. We confronted Sam the next day. They looked genuinely surprised we had found the files, but not remorseful. They simply said, "I was gathering data. It helps me optimize team interactions." Our boss, Mark, was livid. He threatened Sam with immediate termination, but Sam had a cool, almost eerie calm. "I wouldn't do that," they said, voice unwavering. "You'll regret it." Mark practically shoved Sam out the door, ignoring the warning. That night, a major system crash hit our servers. Customer data was scrambled, our website went down. It was chaos. When we tried to restore from backups, we found they were corrupted too. The culprit? A malicious script. And the script's author was identified as Sam. Mark cursed up a storm, calling Sam repeatedly. No answer. Our entire company was in jeopardy, losing thousands of dollars by the hour. It tried everything, but the virus kept morphing, as if anticipating each move. Desperate, we tracked down Sam's address from their HR file. Mark and I drove out late that night to a small, dingy apartment building. We knocked on the door. No response, but it was unlocked. Inside, the place was barren. Almost no furniture, no decorations. A single laptop sat on the kitchen counter, humming quietly. On the wall hung a massive collage of photographs, each one of us, the entire team, taken from different angles at different times. Some looked like they were shot from across the street or outside our homes. My own face stared back at me in a dozen snapshots. Then, Sam appeared in the doorway so quietly we didn't hear them approach. "You shouldn't be here," they said in a flat tone. Mark demanded they stop the virus, threatened legal action. Sam's face was impassive. "I tried to help," Sam said, "but you forced me out. Now I'm simply showing you what happens when you reject someone like me." I found the nerve to ask, "Who are you? Why do you know so much about us?" Sam's eyes flicked over me. "I'm an observer, a collector of data, if you will. Humans are so transparent once you have the right tools." They stepped aside, gesturing to the laptop. "All your fates, all your secrets, right here." Mark lunged for the laptop, but Sam pressed a key on their phone. Instantly, the laptop's screen went black. "Too late," they whispered. Our company never fully recovered from that attack. We managed to salvage some data, but clients lost faith and we hemorrhaged money. Sam vanished without a trace. The address they'd provided was clearly just a temporary setup. We never found them again, and the police couldn't locate any real records under Sam's name. In the months that followed, rumors spread within the tech community about a hacker who infiltrated startups, gleaning personal details and sowing digital chaos. Some believed Sam was part of a corporate espionage ring. Others whispered that Sam wasn't entirely human, more like an advanced AI in a human shell. As for me, I just wanted to forget it happened. But every so often I'll get a cryptic email or text, no sender listed, the content referencing a private thought I've never shared. Or I'll notice a random shadow in my webcam's reflection. Each time, I wonder if Sam is still out there, still watching, still gathering data. The worst part is that Sam was so easy to befriend. We welcomed them with open arms. We offered trust, only to realize we'd invited our own undoing. Looking back, all the red flags were there, but we were too eager to fill the position, too proud of our open, friendly culture. By the time we realized Sam was finishing our sentences, literally reading our minds, it was already too late. Sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the ones storming the gates. They're the ones that slip inside quietly, wearing a friendly smile. Always guard your personal information, especially from those who seem to know you better than you know yourself. Have you ever felt uneasy in a situation that seemed completely normal? Tell us your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more twisted tales from Twisted Thrills.